In conclusion, regardless of our origins and where we're going, we don't have any ill intentions towards you. Zheng was currently communicating with the United States 7th Fleet commander. In actual fact, the United States 7th Fleet had come to a halt after Team China's surprise attack. They didn't even dare continue attacking Team China. Team China's battle prowess as well as that giant black dragon had awed them. It was a battle power not belonging to this world. It was so powerful that they had lost several warships without killing anyone, a situation hitherto unseen. Just as the American Navy was in a panic, Team China had sent over some requests. Do you think that the actions of snatching a warship and using a super weapon to display your strength don't constitute as malicious actions? The fleet commander looked into the video display. Frankly, this was the first time he had seen Team China's appearance. They didn't have any form of 3 heads or 6 arms and looked no different from normal humans. In fact, they didn't even compare to normal soldiers, as they had girls and young children in their midst. This composition didn't have any semblance of being an army. Zheng was silent for a moment. Please believe we had no alternative. In fact, did we use that weapon to attack Pearl Harbor itself? Or did we indiscriminately kill anybody from Pearl Harbor? We don't have much of a relation to this world. We only came here for a certain mission, and will leave soon, possibly to never return. If so, can we have peace negotiations? That commander was silent for a long time, before saying, I'm merely a fleet commander. I don't have the authority to discuss the topic of peace. I'll redirect you now to the President of the United States and the... Zheng could only bitterly laugh. After 10 seconds, the video display showed 7 or 8 old military men and several people clad in Western suits. In the lead was a man in his 50s, who looked slightly plump. This was the President of the United States in this world. This is our first communication between each other. What should I address you as? Mr. Robber? Terrorists from the future world? Or those about to become the terrorists of this world? The American president smiled, staring at Zheng. Zheng could only smile bitterly. He could roughly guess what sort of lies Team East Sea had fed the United States government. However, this was something unavoidable. They naturally couldn't casually divulge matters pertaining to God's realm. Lying was the only way forward in this situation when they need the United States government's help. Unless Team China's strength reached a certain level, they too had to make these kind of lies. Please address us as Team China. This is our true name. We can't inform you of the rest. Zheng shrugged his shoulders. The American president looked very haggard, and rubbed his temples. This mister from Team China, perhaps you aren't aware of exactly how exactly your team has shaken our world? You snatched a warship and used a kind of super weapon to cause a few islands to vanish off the map. Although it can be said that nuclear weapons rival this weapon, it definitely doesn't exist like a laser like this, and it couldn't exist in the hands of a few people. Fine. Putting aside the issue of the weapon temporarily, what is your goal? Snatching our warship, intimidating us, and attacking our 7th Fleet first. No, it should be calling it as destroying half of the 7th Fleet. These actions are the actions of a terrorist ideology through and through. What is your goal? The more Zheng heard, the greater his headache grew. He wasn't the kind of person to mess with a government, and now wasn't the time to carry on the intimidation or threats. Showing their strength was merely as a deterrence, but if they were misunderstood by the other party, it would cause the opposite result. Trying to act smart but messing it up instead wasn't worth it, so he straightforwardly said, as I said, we have no other goal. It was just for our safety. For the time being, you can think we're terrorists from the future. However, that can't make us have the crime of being this world's terrorists, right? What if we join America as asylum seekers? Does your political asylum accept people from the future? Huh? What? Not only the president in the video display froze, but so did those military officers and civil servants. They hadn't expected this vicious terrorist from the future which had great power would have political asylum as their request. America had never had a precedent of an asylum seeker from the future. Of course, the technologies in our hand can be gifted to America with restrictions as compensation for the losses incurred in this incident, as well as some weapons more powerful than this era. We only request a safe environment as part of our asylum. This request shouldn't be too overboard, right? Zheng said to the video display. Apologies. I'll have to discuss this with them. I think that since everyone has shown their sincerity, can we have normal interactions? Our Navy won't attack you, so we'll ask you to maintain your self-control. I think this should be beneficial for both sides, right? The president thought on it briefly before hurriedly saying. He looked to have already made his decision. However, those who played politics couldn't make these kind of snap decision, so they had to have discussions with their aides and staff first. And thus, another half an hour passed. The president finally had news. It hadn't been out of Zheng's expectations. America had indeed eagerly accepted the team's asylum request, and had even wanted to immediately send out a helicopter to fetch Zheng and the rest to the America territories. Helicopters in this weather? Better not. Well, find a small island to settle down on, until the storm blows over. Well, go over to America then. However, we hope that the United States 7th Fleet can protect us. How about this? Well, wait at the Diao Islands for the 7th Fleet. Well, talk in detail there about the kind of technologies and weapons to give to America. This result wasn't perfect, but America finally relaxed and at least didn't have to use nuclear weapons and could even get future technologies and weapons. Thus, the American president as well as his aides and staff couldn't help but celebrate and congratulate each other. Seriously, we have to lie every time to get through it. Greed, it's always greed that's people undoing. Zheng muttered. At the same time, he looked at that Japanese girl with a frosty expression, that Team East C member Sara Aoi. Nice to meet you. I'm Team China's leader, and they're Team China's members. Please don't have such a tense expression. We don't have people like those in your Team East C who would do vile things to you. Don't worry. Zheng smiled slightly. With a cold smile, Sara Aoi pointed at a distance. Don't make it sound so nice. If you're not ill-treating your captives, what's going on with them? Sara Aoi was pointing at that group from Team East C who had their entire bodies dislocated by Yingkong. They were lying in a corner of the room wailing non-stop. They did look quite pitiful, begging for mercy and wailing continuously. Zheng shrugged his shoulders. We are a God's Realm team. We're not a charity. Honestly, if the advantage lay with your Team East C, what would you have done? Don't tell me just the 2 or 3 of you could have stopped your team from killing us. Or, perhaps something more vile would have happened. Sara Aoi's mouth opened and closed, but not a word came out for a long time. She could only helplessly look down, ignoring whatever Zheng said. Of course, you could deny it, but I'm speaking of fact. Also, can you deny what my teammate experienced over there? So, those that need to be killed will definitely be killed. They can't run if they want to. Zheng continued. Sara Aoi maintained her silence, before saying softly, then kill me as well. That's not much meaning to me surviving alone. Are you sure you want to die before Team East C's leader? Zheng laughed. Her head abruptly shot up, and she anxiously asked, Kuriki-kun is still alive? You're not lying? Zheng smiled as he removed the silver-colored metal piece at the back of her head. Confirm it yourself with your Psyche Force scan. Sara Aoi immediately shut her eyes, and her expression instantly relaxed. She smiled slightly, and Zheng placed the metal piece back on her head. Well, stop the communication here. As I said before, those that should die will be killed. They humiliated my teammate, and this is a team battle. I need to be responsible for my team members and can't abandon enhancing them. Of course, you 4 can live, as long as you do something for me. Sara Aoi's face immediately paled, and her body trembled faintly. She grit her teeth and looked down. After a long time, she finally steeled herself, all right, as long as you let them off, I promise you. I'll do anything. So saying, she couldn't hold back her tears. Zheng hadn't recovered yet from his shock. He immediately realized what was happening when he saw Cheng Xia laughing strangely not far off. Don't have strange thoughts. I'm not as filthy as your teammates. I hope you can wake up our teammates. They've entered sleep in the heart's devil state. Also, I promise you to let the 3 of them live, effective for this movie. Team China. Wait for me. Even if I die, I won't let you take her. Ever since Zheng had taken the 10 Team East C members away, it had been as if Miyatakariki had lost his soul, ending up confused and at a complete loss. After he had received Sara Aoi's Psyche Force communication, he had gone mad, and had begun cutting himself, letting his blood flow into a container. Kuriki-kun. You'll die if you use this move. The youth named Mitarashi immediately stopped him, shouting. Miyatakariki pushed him away with his strength. Even if I die, I won't abandon my comrades in death. Forget about those who renounced me, only her, she's the only one I can't abandon no matter what. Out of my way. He cut open the blood vessels on his wrist, letting out blood, and his face gradually paled. Mitarashi didn't retreat after being pushed away, instead rushing forward to grab Miyatakariki's waist from the back. Kuriki-kun. How could we beat a monster like that Team China leader? He obviously didn't even use half of his strength when he battled us before. Don't go, this obviously isn't a monster we can resist. If you send yourself to your death, wouldn't you be wasting Sara Aoi's intentions to sacrifice herself? Don't do it. Let go. For the longest time, I've been suppressing my feelings towards her because of my responsibilities as team leader and everyone's expectations. I thought these days would last till we returned to the real world. But I was wrong. In the deepest parts of my heart, I've never once let go of her. Today, I abandon my responsibilities as team leader and my hope for life. I only hope to hold up the promise I made to her once, to hold her hand and die together. Mitarashi wanted to say something, but he saw that old man Kami Miyasai. He went to the container and slit his wrists as well, joining in the bloodletting. This stunned Mitarashi, and he froze for a while, before standing up unhesitatingly, cutting his wrists and letting his blood flow out. The container was gradually filled up. I'll use Silent Eye, the secret art of the Ghost Knight. Sara, I'm coming to fulfill my promise. Even if I have to die, I'll be holding your hand as I die. At this moment on Team China's destroyer, Zheng was carefully advising Sara Aoi. It's these 2. I need you to use Psyche Force to enter their consciousness, and help them open a passageway to the real world. This will be very dangerous, so I've chosen this utility room of the bottommost floor to avoid external disturbances. These 2 will be protecting you. Zheng indicated Wangxia and Zero, who had followed along. Protect. Sara Aoi sneered. Not keep a watch on? That too. Do you think we shouldn't? Zheng said calmly. Honestly, I don't have much malice to any of you for remaining. I only hope to wake up my companions. As long as you wake them up, I'll definitely keep up my end of the bargain and let you all off. Sarawi laughed coldly a few times, before lowering her head and saying softly, but what use is it? We only have 3 stones that can invalidate negative points. One of us 4 must still die. Kuriki-kun will definitely relinquish his stone to me based on his personality. What's the point to living on alone? Fine. Team China also has negative points invalidating stones. Well, give you 1. As the price, please save them, else the 4 of you must die. Zheng said peacefully. He left the room after speaking, leaving only Wang Xia and Zero guarding the room's entrance. Zheng walked from the bottommost level to the meeting room in the center. Team China's members were all gathered there, even Yingkong who had woken up. Zheng looked at everyone. We're reaching the sea near the Diao Islands soon. Everyone make your preparations. I think that Team East Sea leader will attack us again and we have to guard against dirty plays by America. Xian, how about the other countries' navies? Xian nodded. The Japan self-defense forces have turned course, while we've given instructions to the American side. The Korean Navy is the same, with only the China Navy still en route to the Diao Islands. America is already using diplomatic routes to undergo urgent negotiations. They seem to be using economic concessions such as low-interest loans for the right of birth. The American Navy doesn't have any other abnormalities, though they are deploying another fleet to the Diao Islands. It doesn't matter anymore. In terms of time we have the complete advantage, as long as we can drag it until when she wakes up our members. Now, another question. Can the T-virus not be injected into our captives? Zheng thought about it before asking. Yes. The T-virus needs time to activate and the virus needs to stabilize afterwards. Only then can it achieve the effect of genetic constraint unlocking. But in terms of time, we'll reach the Diao Islands within 12 hours. Saving them would be within 24 hours, while the American Navy will reach between 20 to 24 hours. In other words, we can return to God's dimension within a day and night. It's too dangerous if we want to stay on in this world, if you want to do it as a foundation for the final battle. My suggestion is just kill them off, then immediately return to God's dimension after waking them up. Why? Zheng frowned and asked curiously. What do we have to fear? America? Or the approaching China fleet? If we drag it on, we should be able to drag on past this time, right? How about God's threat? Xian pushed up his spectacles. This movie actually has a loophole to exploit. As long as we don't enter the Diao Islands, we can stay in this world for a decade or 2, or over a century. As long as we train peacefully for a long time, we can return to God's dimension after we become very strong. What would happen to the final battle? God wouldn't let this happen. Remember, you've encountered such a situation before? Resident Evil Apocalypse was the same, where you had to go to a certain place. What if you didn't go there? Even without Team Devil, you'll have been attacked by a nuclear missile or the evolutionary virus would have progressed to a higher stage. Anyways, you can exploit this loophole, but you need to be mentally prepared and have great power. God will keep on increasing the difficulty again and again. Just now when I checked out the submarines, I saw a giant octopus lingering at the seabed. If I'm not wrong, this octopus will be the first trial for us if we cross a certain period of time. Zheng sighed. What a pity. We'll have gotten over twofold the benefits if we could unlock the genetic constraint before killing them. Whatever. No matter what, we still have a large team benefit this time round. It can still help close the gap between Team Devil, Team Celestial and us. Everyone will go and patrol yourselves now. We need to ensure safety for the remaining day and night. If someone from Team East Sea infiltrates, there's no need to say anything. Just knock them unconscious. If you can't do so, you can just kill them. When he had finished arranging everything, Zheng went to the highest point of the deck. He sat there, concentrating fully on his surroundings. Team East Sea was best at their sneak attacks and infiltrating, so he didn't intend to rest and would remain on high alert from this moment on. The most important thing now was to ensure the safety of downstairs. If anyone dared disturb them, they would be executed without mercy. All of Team China and the destroyer passed over 10 hours in this alert state. Although they had already reached the outer perimeter of the Diao Islands, every person looked very haggard. However, they didn't dare be negligent as this was the final battle before their return to God's dimension. Imhotep even depleted a huge amount of energy to summon a dozen mummies in this sandless environment. Practically every passageway in the ship was occupied. Unless they could become invisible, no one would be able to easily make their way to the bottom of the ship. At this time, the United States 7th Fleet was urgently following after. They had finally reached the outer perimeter of the Diao Islands. Although the higher UPS of America had already called for a ceasefire, they who had already experienced Team China's might only dared to stay at a distance and remain alert. They then deployed a small warship to go to Team China, seemingly wanting to discuss something with Team China. They've come. Zheng looked at that nearing small warship. Even without psyche force, he could sense a person there currently emanating a shocking battle intent directed at him. It was obvious that Team East Sea's leader was planning to stake his life. Halt. Warship, do not come closer, or else we shall attack. Zheng shouted when there was still a distance. His voice was even louder than a loudspeaker. However, under the manipulation of infinitesimal control, the voice sounded extremely soft when near. Only when it reached that warship did it start to spread. Not long after, that warship indeed stopped a distance from the destroyer. Zheng flew out from the deck to 100 meters above the warship. Below, Solely the Team East's leader was standing there. His two companions had already disappeared without a trace. The katana-wielding man was covered by a visible layer of black runes. He also used a piece of cloth to cover up his eyes, his battle getup looking extremely strange. Team China, release my comrade. Mayatakariki said coldly, gripping his katana. Apologies. I still need her for a time. Give me 12 hours. I'll return her unharmed to you then. Zheng replied indifferently. Damn you. How dirty. There's no need to say anything. Mayatakarik's face went green. Something unknown went through his mind, and he shouted, let's battle. Even if I die, I'll die together with her. Mayatakarik's current experience looked extremely colorful in personality or extremely unique. It looked very weird, but in this getup, he had an extremely peculiar presence, which made Zheng involuntarily get serious. This time, Mayatakariki wasn't continuously wiping blood on his body. He merely tapped his katana on the ground lightly on the ground. The black fog on his body suddenly gushed out, enveloping the area over 10 meters around him. A substance formed of the black mist gradually appeared within, a majority constructing a set of wings behind his back, with the surplus creating multiple strange dark red eyes around him. This move is called Silent Eyes. It uses the mind's eye to attack, the so-called hearts rends the soul when pursued to the extreme, all can be cut, whether the fleshy body or soul. Mayatakarik's expression wasn't clear, and was completely hidden within that substance like black mist. The black mist wrapped him up as if it were armor, and he slowly flew up as he spoke. The rune wings behind his back were extremely beautiful, and were genuine items capable of flight. Wave eye, wings of light. The various eyes around began to flash violently. When he was a dozen meters from Zheng, the wings behind him began to spin like a wheel as it slashed towards Zheng, spinning like a pitch-black wheel with sawtooths. The speed could no longer be followed with the eyes, and Zheng, who had been previously unconcerned, could only hastily unsheath Tiger's soul. With the sound of metal colliding, the wheel's force seemed to actually not be inferior to him in explosion. Mayatakariki howled as he charged forward once again. However, Zheng had already activated explosion and sent a saber slash ahead of Mayatakariki. When Mayatakariki used his katana to resist, he had already landed a kick on his chest. He sent him flying over a kilometer away, towards a distant aircraft carrier. This isn't the place to battle. Let's have a good fight over there. This kick was firmly within the power level of explosion, but it hadn't been able to destroy his black mist armor. It had only sent him flying. However, this kick revealed a flaw. Mayatakariki possessed this level of strength, but he didn't possess the level of genetic constraint to control it. His mind couldn't follow the speed born of this power and he didn't possess sufficient control. This power was definitely not his innate power, but a borrowed kind. Mayatakariki landed heavily on the aircraft carrier's deck, causing a half-meter deep depression in it. However, it seemed it hadn't resulted in any heavy injuries. He leapt up with a forceful stomp, vigorously slashing upwards when he saw Zheng chasing after. Wave eye, piercing claw. 5 claw fingers emitting black light suddenly appeared out of the katana, which grabbed towards Zheng. However, it was struck into nothingness by Zheng with a wave of his hand before it had even reached 10 meters away from him. A crimson light blade was on Tiger's soul, and it was stronger than this black claw. A casual brush had disintegrated it and Zheng didn't stop there. He descended from the sky, sending his foot kicking out. He landed on the spot Mayatakariki was before he got out of the way. With a crash, the spot Mayatakariki had been standing on caved in 2 or 3 meters deep. If the man himself had still been there, he definitely wouldn't have had a whole corpse left. True, your power this time is great, and can be described as being on the cusp of the 4th stage. But is there a point? Only personal power that belongs to yourself is truly great power. Power that can't be controlled is a burden no matter how great it is. If my guess is correct, this power should be the light of the soul. Zheng stood there, sighing. How miraculous. I didn't expect God's exchanges to have a similar technique. It can stimulate the consciousness power to the point of the light of the soul, although it's a double-edged sword, harming both yourself and others. No, it should be harming you more. I refuse to believe you can control it with your current level. Mayatakariki said hoarsely, correct. I can't use it at my current level. But, I said it before, I won't retreat even half a step backwards even in the face of death. So, treat it as a last request of a warrior. Kill me. So saying, he leapt at Zheng once again. Just to die. I remember once I saw in a book about a Japanese custom. It said under the beautiful cherry blossoms, the snow-white sword flashes past, peerlessly beautiful even if it dies out. Is that how it is? Even if you die out? Zheng laughed coldly. He didn't care what Mayatakariki did or what move he used. He swung out Tiger's soul using both forehand grips and reverse grips. That crimson light blade was unparalleled, and every strike could crush each and every one of Mayatakarik's attacks. Mayatakariki was forced to jump backwards to avoid that light blade. The phrase using force to break through technique was perfectly encapsulated here. How naive. You think that dying is courage, so there's nothing to fear. It just happens to be opposite. Living on is what needs greater courage. Zheng roared. Living on is to follow through with your convictions. Live on, together with your companions. Return alive back to the real world with them. Only if you're alive can you obtain a better future. Are you really doing all this just to die? Mayatakariki was silent. However, The black mist around his body began to be much more violent a moment later. He shouted hoarsely, "She is my conviction. Without her, what meaning would life have? I've always wanted to live on, despite countless instances of despair and disappointment. I've wanted to change the world around me. What would you know? Yeah, I'm a Japanese. I was born in a military family. My parents and elders were indeed from the right wing. But was it me who wanted it to be so? What I wanted for was change, a normal childhood. What I did not want was constantly fighting my father with a shina, a bamboo sword, and ending up bruised and battered. I didn't want to learn that kind of revised history or those revised textbooks. I didn't want to face enmity with enmity or look down on others to elevate myself. I just want to be ordinary and live on with a loved one and get a job and chat with friends. What would you know?" Mayatakariki howled, and the black mist on his body surged endlessly. All the eyes around him all fused into a pair of giant eyes which seemed to envelop the surrounding 100 meters. And Zheng was absolutely within this area. "I said it already. Even if I die, I won't retreat." Silent eye. That pair enormous black eyes abruptly opened. Zheng suddenly felt as if Mayatakariki had become much faster, to the point that he was faster than his limit in explosion. Mayatakariki had already passed his light blade and rushed to his side, a katana streaking past his arm. Thanks to Zheng's shocking reflexes, he was able to dodge it before his arm was sliced off. Even so, a long cut had been drawn on his arm. The speed quickened. "Did you overdraft your life force?" Zheng rubbed the wound on his arm, asking curiously. Mayatakariki didn't reply to him. However, Zheng was suddenly enlightened upon seeing an abnormality in the speed the dust was falling at the spots on the ground Mayatakariki had stepped on. "Wrong. You didn't become faster. I became slower. How wondrous. Such a space belongs to a high grade of hypnosis. Isn't it a method that assaults the soul as well?" Zheng exerted his strength as he swung his saber a number of times, forcing the closing in Mayatakariki to move backwards. Laughing, he said, "I said it before, you and I are different. I don't have any special enhancements outside of speed and strength, which is the best battle style I've gained after experiencing life and death. Our levels of power are too far apart. Although this is unfair to you, alas this is God's realm, so I don't have much to be guilty over. Then this is destruction." A heated battle was ongoing on the aircraft carrier. Looking from afar, the entire carrier was enshrouded in a layer of black mist, that wasn't being blown away by the wind. The black mist was only covering a large circle on the deck, and outsiders were unable to see what was going on inside. "Is it fine? They've been inside for over an hour, Xian. Did something happen?" Honglu looked at the distance worriedly. Xian spoke, not even raising his head to do so. "It's fine. Zheng is stronger than you imagine, and has experienced countless life and death battles. This strength is already in the deepest parts of his bones. Apart from his clone, no one can win against the current him. He's been training and getting to his peak state ever since his revival, all for the final battle. He's stronger than you imagine. He won't lose, not until he meets the enemy he must face in the final battle." "Xian, when have you started saying such philosophical words?" Honglu was shocked hearing such things. "I'm quite proud of my psychological counseling abilities. Would you like me to give you some counseling?" "Never mind." At this moment, a figure was sent flying. Mayatakariki had used his katana to block Zheng's kick, but he hadn't been able to offset that horrifying force. The katana had immediately shattered, and he had been sent flying over 1,000 meters, landing in the water and causing a splash dozens of meters tall. Another figure then shot out at even greater speed, fishing Mayatakariki out of the water a second or two after he fell in. The man's black mist on his body had actually been kicked apart and he was near death. This is the gap between our power levels I was talking about. Be it using raw power to break through technique or technique to break through raw power, the crux is the level of powers involved. Nothing else matters. Zheng let out a breath, leisurely deactivating destruction. At this moment, two streams of psyche force came from the distant destroyer's lower area before Mayatakariki could say anything. One immediately contacted Mayatakariki, while the other contacted Zheng. "Welcome back, Lan and Kappa," Zheng said silently in his heart. He looked at Mayatakariki, who he was holding. He was on the verge of death. It wasn't just Zheng attacks that had done this. The technique he himself had used had inflicted greater injuries. Zheng didn't hesitate, and took out a pill to pop into his mouth. He said to the destroyer, "There's no threat to his life. Bring him to God's dimension for a full body repair. After this, I think he'll become much, much stronger." Then he turned to Mayatakariki. "You Japanese call the Diao Islands the Senkaku Islands, correct? If you want to change anything, start with this. Go. I won't kill you. Tell your future team members the Diao Islands belong to China." Finished speaking, Zheng turned to the Diao Islands, the entrance back to God's dimension. That was where the final battle would begin.